The Rangers get their first ninth inning comeback of the season, and it comes at an absolutely crucial time. Plus, we're talking about 5 players the Rangers could call up when rosters expand on Friday. All that and more on the episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On the Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan since 2010, the founder and host for all 5 seasons of this Locked On Rangers podcast. Today is Tuesday, August 29th. Your Rangers are 74-57, tied for second place in the AL West, 1 game behind those stinking Seattle Mariners. Thank you all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers. Subscribe on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to listen every day and to comment nearly any single thing below. Before we get into this wild comeback win and some big news on the Evan Carter front, this episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Swing for the fences on Sleeper picks and you could win up to 100 times your money. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDON and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. Now the Rangers won 4-3, a rare 1-run win, and an even rarer, actually never before seen this year, a win where the Rangers were down heading into the 9th inning. After 8 innings, the Rangers were 0 for, I believe it was 48 this year, when they were losing after 8 innings. And this is the first time they have had a comeback win. They were down 3-2, so not the hugest comeback win, but still, it is a comeback win, and it is just so incredibly needed. This team had lost 9 out of 10, including 3 out of 4 to the Twins, including the Sunday game that just sucked the absolute life out of every single person that watched it. The 13th inning walk-off walk to the freaking Twins, in which the Rangers blew not one, but 2 opportunities to win with a 1-run lead. And all they needed was 3 outs, and they couldn't get it. They had Aroldis Chapman, their best and seemingly only reliable reliever, on, and he boxed the runner, the tying run over to second base like he didn't even know that there was a new rule instituted about not being able to throw over as many times. And then we all know what happened the rest of that game. But this was just a massive win for the Rangers, and it felt rough early on. This was a game that Jon Gray looked like he was pretty much cruising for the most part, and then just 2 really bad pitches that kind of got away from him, and there's 3 runs, and that felt like an insurmountable lead against Tyler Meagle, who looked absolutely fantastic for the Mets in this one. Meagle went 6 innings of 1-run ball with 8 strikeouts, and these Rangers were they could not get to his fastball. They could not get to his curveball, which also looked really good. He only walked 1, only allowed 1 run, and it was really only when things started to get a little wild on him in the 6th inning, he was able to make it through that 6th inning. The Rangers were able to get the rest of their comeback off of Brooks Raley and Trevor Gott, who were the 2 relievers who the Rangers were able to get to in this one. Just absolutely massive comeback for the Rangers, and it was just a complete team effort. This was an incredibly frustrating game because it felt like almost every other loss in this, losing 9 out of 10, including the 8-game losing streak. It's just the Rangers did a lot of things right, but just couldn't quite get out of their own way, couldn't quite get the right breaks. I mean, this Rangers team had 14 hard hit balls from the offense. 14 hard hit balls. Every single person in this Rangers starting lineup had at least 1 hard hit ball. This team was smashing things left, right, and center, including Corey Seager's bat, which, in case you hadn't seen the rounds on Twitter, Corey Seager's bat had seen some horrors. It had seen a lot of hits, a lot of extra base hits, a lot of wear and tear. The thing was just battered and bruised, and eventually got broken on a broken bat, 33-mile-an-hour exit velocity on that broken bat single, which was a hit with runners in scoring position. The Rangers have not done a great job of that during this losing streak. They were incredible early on, which is why they won so many games 15-3 and however they did. I felt like every Sunday game was just an absolutely massive offensive onslaught, and We have not seen that Sunday offense in quite some time. I would very much like to see it back in September, or I guess that the next Sunday will be September, and maybe see it in the playoffs just a little bit. But 3 for 10 for the Rangers in this one, including a massive hit for Adolis Garcia, who continues to be just incredibly hot and cold. He had a huge walk in this one, a pair of strikeouts, and a 108-mile-an-hour double on a 3-1 fastball that he just did not miss. Hit the absolute crap out of it. And it should have been a walk. It should have been a walk. The zone was, again, a little erratic in this one. He had 3-0 count, and ball 4 was called strike 1. And then the very next pitch, it always said, all right, you want to continue this at bat? Okay, fine by me. And here he goes, driving in a run, the first run for the Rangers on the day. He could not be driven in by Robbie Grossman after him. Robbie Grossman did have an RBI ground out later on a hard hit ball, and that was right after the Rangers, they had done a good job of putting together some decent at-bats with runners in scoring position, but even after that broken bat single by Corey Seager, Nathaniel Lowe had an incredibly hard-hit ball, which was one of his few outs on the night, 107 miles an hour off the bat, and it turned it into a ground into a double play. There was a leadoff double by Marcus Semien, then that broken bat single by Seager, and that was all before the Robbie Grossman RBI, or excuse me, not Robbie Grossman, the Adolis Garcia RBI double on what should have been a walk, which, thank you, umpires. I actually am genuine in that. Thank you for your bad call and for letting Adolis Garcia get another pitch to hit and score the only run off of Tyler Megill in this one. But this is just a complete team effort, including Jonah Heim, who, after hitting that grand slam in his 1-for-6 effort, 13 innings, the fact that he played again today, after catching those 13 innings, I believe he caught all 13 of those innings, and then he comes in today with no day off. Mitch Garver gets a day off. I feel like that's a little unfair, but you know what? I mean, after you get your first hit or first extra base hit since coming off the IL, and the Rangers were steadfast, and Jonah Heim was steadfast that it was not an injury thing, that he was looking like a shell of his former self. He just didn't have his timing, which, again, I think maybe a little bit of a rehab outing could have helped him. But, I mean, AA pitchers and AAA pitchers, they're nowhere near as good as big leaguers. So just getting right back into the thick of things was kind of the move for him. And it seems like that swing on a pitch that was down and out of the zone that he hit for a grand slam kind of triggered him in this one, because this is how his at-bats went. He did strike out in his first plate appearance, then had a really nice walk, then 101-mile-an-hour single with the exit velocity, then a 103.6-mile-an-hour single, which started off the rally in the top of the 9th inning, which the Rangers got some incredible at-bats, including one by Nathaniel Lowe that, when we look back at this season, that 2 RBI single might end up being one of the most important at-bats from the Rangers this season. Coming up, we're going to look at 5 players that the Rangers could call up when rosters expand, and a little bit of news about Evan Carter and a potential call-up. But first, this word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Want the chance to win more money with less picks? Head to Sleeper, the #1 sports app, where you can win up to 100 times your money on just 2 or more fantasy baseball picks. Do you think that Andrew Heaney is going to have a nice bounce-back outing against the Mets? Because, well, let's face it, this Mets offense is not exactly the most dangerous. Well, if you do, then you can swing for the fences with up to 100 times payouts. All you have to do is choose just 2 or more players that you like and select more or less in their stat categories like home runs, strikeouts, hits, and more. Get your picks right, and you could win big. If you're betting on a lot of hits from Corey Seager, that feels like a pretty safe bet. If you're betting on a lot of hits from Nathaniel Lowe or some clutch RBIs from Nathaniel Lowe like he got in this Monday night game, that is a great pick as well. So use promo code LOCKEDON, and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms and use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. Shout out to the Aviators for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. On tomorrow's show, I'll be talking about where the Rangers have an advantage over their opposition in this AL West race. The Rangers take on the Mets this week and catch every pitch with the hometown broadcast on SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search Rangers. Now, I do want to give a credit to this bullpen. Yesterday's episode, I felt like all of last week's episodes were just dedicated to how bad is this bullpen. This bullpen is so terrible. They can't do anything right. They're doing absolutely everything wrong. And you know what? they came up big in this one. 2 shutout innings from Martin Perez, 1 shutout inning and a save from Jose Leclerc, a nearly perfect inning with 2 strikeouts, just 1 walk, no hits allowed, and a save and a win in a 1-run game. That is the most important part, is that he got a save and a win for the Rangers. Not that saves are always the most end-all, be-all stat, but at this point in the season when you are winning games, the save means you won. And the Rangers need every freaking win they can get, whether it's against the Mets, whether it's against the Twins, whether it's against the Astros next week, or literally anybody else the Rangers have on their schedule. They need to keep winning these games because the other teams in the AL West that are going for it right now, which is obviously the Mariners and the Astros, they are not slowing down anytime soon. They have good teams. Now, I do still think the Rangers have been better for the full year, and obviously if the bullpen wasn't such a freaking mess all year, the Rangers would have still a 5-game lead, even with all the close losses that they've had. But still, I got to give credit to this bullpen for coming up clutch, including Jose Leclerc, which with just one of the most magnificent at-bats of the season. It was just absolutely beautiful painting the corners against Daniel Vogelbach, which was the second batter that he faced. Pitch number 1 was on the outside corner against a lefty, 94.8 miles an hour, 4-seam fastball, about belt high, but right on the edge, called strike 1. Mets fans didn't like it, which, I've about had it with opposing fan bases booing the strike zone when they are getting incredibly generous strike zone from the umpire. Then pitch number 2, which you literally could not place this more perfectly if you hand put it there in the strike zone on the corner. A 87.5 mile an hour changeup, a 7-ish mile an hour difference, just beautifully placed. Called strike 2. Daniel Vogelbach didn't like it. Mets fans didn't like it. 0-2 count. Pitch number 3, 88.9 mile an hour changeup, bottom of the zone, but a little bit over the plate, but still perfectly on the edge. Called strike 3, did not take the bat off his shoulder. 3 straight pitches, 3 straight strikes on the perfect edges of the strike zone. That is Jose Leclerc at his absolute best. He is a guy who does nibble a little bit outside the zone, can be incredibly frustrating to watch, even when he's on at times, because he usually doesn't get those 3 pitch strikeouts. Usually it takes him a little while. Usually he's got to work up all the way to a full count. This time he didn't take any extra pitches. He did exactly what he needed to do. And also, I want to give credit to Martin Perez, who I don't think the Rangers have been using him nearly enough in this bullpen. With everyone has been so overtaxed, using Chris Stratton as a long man a little bit too frequently for my liking at this point because of all the big home runs that Stratton is giving up, including that grand slam. But Martin Perez, 2 shutout innings in a game where the Rangers desperately needed those shutout innings. When he came into the game, it was the 7th inning. I was a little concerned because, Jon Gray had only thrown 89 pitches. You think, okay, well, he's kind of dealing. He did give up those 2 home runs, but he had 9 strikeouts, just 1 walk, 4 hits in this one. But still, you think, okay, after you use so much of your bullpen on Sunday and used it a lot on Friday, in a blowout loss, but still, and then you used it a decent amount on Thursday as well. This bullpen's pretty taxed, and it's not that great anyway. So, if you could get 7 innings out of Jon Gray, you'd really want to. But, I mean, I didn't think that Jose Leclerc was going to be available in this one. I thought it was going to be Will Smith and Martin Perez and Glenn Otto, who was also called up as Jonathan Hernandez was sent down on Sunday. I thought those were going to be the only guys, but no, Jose Leclerc was in there on, I believe this was maybe his 3rd straight game. Maybe it was just 3 out of 4 that he's pitched, but he's pitched a decent amount, and he has been fairly effective. I know he was pulled out before he could get a full inning out of the game on Sunday, but still, he has been mostly effective in low leverage situations. The Rangers don't really have much of a choice but to throw him in high leverage situations, and he came up huge for the Rangers. I think this is one of the biggest saves of the season, right up there with the 5-out save by Will Smith in Pittsburgh with the bases loaded. Those 2 are the biggest saves of the season so far. It would have been if the Rangers could have kept a 1-run lead and not blown 3-run lead in Houston with Aroldis Chapman blew with the first home run that he'd given up in, 13 months or whatever it was in Houston. The game the Rangers lost by 1 run, one of 2 games the Rangers lost by 1 run, and another game that I will look very angrily back on at the end of the season if the Rangers don't end up winning the AL West, and honestly, even if they do, because those were 2 games the Rangers could have and should have won. But the bullpen coming up with this kind of a game, like, I know it's been frustrating watching this bullpen, and you think, oh, these guys are all bums, they should cut them all. Like, they've all shown promise. Like, Will Smith is kind of, it doesn't have the stuff that you think, all right, this is the shutout closer, whatever, but he did convert, 22 out of his first 26 or whatever saves. He was the only reliable bullpen option, and bullpens are by their very nature finicky. I mean, this Mets bullpen had been really, really good for most of the season. They gave up 3 runs in 3 innings, and the loss, it happens to a lot of bullpens, like even the best ones. Cleveland was the best bullpen by far in all of baseball for the first half of the season. You saw what the Rangers did in their sweep, a lot of comeback wins against that Cleveland bullpen that has been overtaxed now and is starting to become one of the worst bullpens because they gave up a bunch of runs to the Twins in their loss today. But, I mean, it happens. Bullpens ebb and flow, and right now the Rangers just need something out of their bullpen. And I know it might be small, but 3 shutout innings from this bullpen in a win and a comeback win might be enough to start turning those switches in their mind of, hey, it's not, oh no, here we go again. It's, oh yes, we're going to do this again in a good way. We're going to win and have more good appearances and maybe start to build on this. But speaking of building on this, the Rangers roster expands on Friday, and there are quite a few options, including Evan Carter, who they might consider adding to their roster when the rosters expand on Friday. We're going to touch on who those are and a little bit of injury news as well. But first, a word from our sponsors. Shout out to the Adolis making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. On Wednesday's show, on Thursday's show, maybe I'll do a crossover. We'll see if we can have a crossover with Locked On Mets to break down this series and maybe even a Rangers sweep. The Rangers take on the Mets this week and catch every pitch with the hometown broadcast on SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search Rangers. Now, there is a little bit of injury news and notes to get to. The Rangers thought that maybe by September 1st they were going to have Nathan Eovaldi back on their roster. They never said that date explicitly, but the rumorings and the mumblings around that were that's about when the Rangers would expect him to be back. But he had a little bit of side tightness after his most recent bullpen. The Rangers are going to have him throw another bullpen on Tuesday. They're just kind of slowing things down. They don't want to have a setback. They don't want to risk not having him for the postseason or for the end of the regular season. He has been their best starter all year, and really they just need him to be healthy when he comes back. If your rotation's worst starter right now is Andrew Heaney, which again, as much as I've complained about him, he is a fine number 5 starter, then you're not desperate to get Nathan Eovaldi back. You are more than willing to wait him out a couple of weeks if that's what he needs to be fully himself when he comes back, because if he's not, then that causes even more problems for this team. But I still haven't talked about Nathaniel the Manual Lowe's incredible at bat. I mean, this was a huge moment. The Rangers got that double by Ezequiel Duran on an 0-2 count. Started off the inning with a single by Jonah Heim, just absolutely smashed off the bat. Then Ezequiel Duran, after he goes down 0-2, fouls off a couple of pitches, gets an 0-2 94.9 mile an hour sinker down and in, and he laces it to the opposite field, just drives it, hits it 98.5 miles an hour off the bat, and hustles his butt to second base, gets himself into scoring position with Josh Smith pinch running for Jonah Heim. That is kind of what allowed him to get to third base. With no outs, runners on second and third, the Rangers were down by 1 run. Up comes Leo Taveras, who strikes out swinging, which was incredibly frustrating. Then Marcus Semien also strikes out swinging, pitches 4 and 5 of that at bat. The foul tip on a 91.5 mile an hour cutter that was middle, and then a 94.3 mile an hour sinker. He strikes out swinging. It just could not be more middle. Incredibly frustrating. Just a sac fly would have tied the game and would have given Corey Seager the ability to come up with the ability to hit the game-winning hit, which I guess he still could have anyway. But of course, the Mets intentionally walked Corey Seager, because why wouldn't you? Even if he hadn't hit a home run at that point. But Nathaniel Lowe is incredibly patient and gets an incredibly terrible strike one call on him. A cutter up and inside off the plate that didn't even hit its mark. It was the catcher had to lunge for it and then still got a call about at least 2 inches inside off the plate for strike one and an 0-0 count. Then ball 2, ball 3, 2-1 count, and right over the heart of the plate, a cutter. Nathaniel Lowe at 90.8 miles an hour does not miss it, hits 103.7 miles an hour off the bat, smashes it, and Ezequiel Duran is off to the freaking races with 2 outs to score the go-ahead run. Great base running by Zeke Duran, great hitting by Nathaniel Lowe, and one of the biggest hits for the Rangers this season. The Rangers just so desperately needed that win, and they're going to need a little bit of help from their expanded roster. Now, the Rangers roster, just like every other roster in Major League Baseball, will expand on September 1st, which is on Friday. And before that, the Rangers will call up Evan Carter. They're not calling him up to the majors just yet, but on his 21st birthday, which is today, happy birthday to Evan Carter, he is getting called up to AAA Round Rock. The Round Rock Express are in position for a playoff run. I don't think the Frisco Rough Riders are. The Round Rock Express had I think it was 13 or 14 straight games that they won, a franchise record, which just ended, I believe, this past weekend, and then they started rattling off another win streak, hopefully on Sunday. So, congrats to Evan Carter getting called up to AAA, and is he one of my 5 players who the Rangers could call up on their September call-ups? Here are the 5 players I think the Rangers could use when they expand the rosters. The expanded rosters will expand by 2 players. You can normally carry 26 players. Now you can carry 28. You can only call up no more than 1 pitcher. So, unfortunately, it can't just be 2 bullpen arms. Otherwise, that's exactly what the Rangers would do. They're going to have to or get to call up a position player, and there's some question as to who that might be. Now, number 1 player I think they should call up is Zach Kent. Zach Kent is a guy who has thrived in AAA so far, has had 1 rough outing, really, so far to this point, but it is still a very good prospect who I thought would be up in the majors at this point already, but that has not been the case for him so far. He has not made his major league debut, but I am really looking forward to seeing what he can do once he gets up to the minors. In the PCL, he has had 5 starts so far, has a 1.76 ERA in 15 innings, just 4 walks to 15 strikeouts and 1 earned run in that span. I think he could really give the Rangers some boost in their pen, a guy who's got a slider that could strike big leaguers out. He's one of the more unique pitchers in the Rangers system, where he is a slider first kind of guy, and he's got all those other 4-5-ish pitches, a 4-seamer, 2-seamer, changeup. I think he's also got a curveball as well. All those basically come out of the same arm slot. They look like they are the exact same pitch until they are about 5 feet in front of you and they are breaking one of 17 different ways. He is a guy who I think could really help this pen out, and they just need somebody back there. They just need somebody out there with some major league stuff, and I think he could definitely provide them that. Number 2 is Cody Bradford, who was the Rangers' longman / made a decent handful of starts. Doesn't have the most explosive stuff, and adding another lefty to the pen that doesn't necessarily strike a whole bunch of guys out and doesn't have the most premium velocity, maybe that's not exactly what you want, but he has shown an ability to get major leaguers out, and at this point the Rangers could use a guy like that in their bullpen. The number 3 guy who I think they could call back up is Jonathan Ellis. Just having another guy who plays a bunch of different positions in the infield, in the outfield, is pretty speedy, so if you need another pinch running option, then that could be your guy. And he didn't get his first major league at bat. He did score his first major league run and did play the field, but did not have an opportunity to get his first major league hit. Unfortunately, I think maybe we'll see him as the Rangers position player that gets called up. I think that might be the most likely case. And then you have Yuri Rodriguez at number 4. He throws hard. He's gotten big leaguers out. He's on the 40-man. That's my pitch for Yuri Rodriguez. I know not a necessarily very inspired pitch, but that's the best I got. And number 5, I think Evan Carter. I think he's just about ready. I know about a week ago, maybe a week and a half ago, I said, I don't know about Evan Carter. I mean, he's gotten eaten up by lefties this year. He's had some moments where he's really slumped, and he is just 20 years old, which now he's 21. Happy birthday again. He's got exactly 100 games under his belt this season. Exactly 100 before he got called up. Exactly a little over 100 games in Frisco. 97 in Frisco this year, and then 6 last year before the start of the playoffs, which again was incredible. Last year when he was called up as a 19-year-old in AA, he was 5.3 years younger than the average position player in the league. Now he's a mere 4.4 years younger than the average position player. He's a guy who just was not overwhelmed at all in spring training. He's got you quality at bats. He has been eaten up a little bit by lefties this year, but he's incredibly fast. He plays great defense. I know that JPM has had some good at-bats and had his first major league home run, and that's great, but his offensive ceiling is not anywhere near Evan Carter's. Evan Carter is going to provide you the peak Travis Jankowski experience, because he's not going to expand the zone very much. He's going to work a crap ton of walks. He's going to be pesky at the plate. He's got more offensive thump than Travis Jankowski. I think he's about as fast, maybe a little bit faster. The defense for Jankowski, a little bit of a push. I think Carter's arm is a little bit better, and I think that Jankowski is a little bit better at stealing bags this year. Evan Carter has 22 stolen bases to 10 times caught stealing on the season. 23 if you include the one bag that he swiped in his 3 games in the Arizona Complex League. But I think Jankowski's got a little bit of the edge on the bases, but the at-bats and the just unfazedness, if that's a word, it's not, but the unfazability, that's also not a word, but I am assigning them to Evan Carter because he is a guy who just, it doesn't matter who he's facing. We saw it in spring training when he's facing off against big leaguers or against guys that were, AA prospects, or whether he was a 19-year-old in AA and leading the offense to a Texas League championship. I mean, he was a huge part of that offense, and the reason why they went on that run, him and Thomas Sajacy, and also not Aaron Zavala at that point, I don't think. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was Dustin Harris. I can't remember. But it was a lot of Evan Carter leading that offense to a Texas League championship. Not that anything that the Frisco, Texas League championship is anywhere close to what playoff experience would be like, or even a pennant chase in the big league level. But I just don't think this kid is fazed by literally anything. If he comes up and he struggles, then you're going to put him on the 40-man roster eventually. I think the easiest way to make that decision, the 40-man roster decision the Rangers would have to do, is because maybe they call up Sam Huff and just cut Austin Hedges. Maybe that's the move they make. I really think it's probably going to end up being Brad Miller to the 60-day IL. I just don't see Brad Miller coming back up, and that feels like the easiest way to get rid of somebody. Or maybe they just cut bait with Travis Jankowski because he has been kind of rough the past month and a half. I don't think they do that either. I think that Brad Miller to the 60-day IL is probably the most likely move they make there, because otherwise you're going to have to cut bait with Jonathan Ornelas, Dustin Harris, or somebody that's on the big league roster position player wise, or Sam Huff, and I really don't see them doing that. I don't know if Evan Carter is going to get called up to the big leagues, but I'm starting to change my tune that having a kid like that come up and provide some spark, and I think he would be a little more consistent offensively than JPM, provide a little bit better defense than JPM, and maybe just a little bit more spark than the young Cuban outfielder who is, he's going to be even much younger than Julio Pablo Martinez, and I think he's going to be a much bigger factor in the Rangers' long-term plans. No offense to JPM, who has really changed my mind this year on whether or not he is a, serviceable, solid big league piece. I think he is now, but I think Evan Carter is going to come up could come up and really provide this team some spark. They kind of need it. Maybe they won't need it as badly if they end up sweeping this Mets team like I hope they do. But this Monday night win was absolutely massive. Every win is massive from this point on. The highs and lows of the Major League season, especially in the pennant chase. I mean, my goodness, what a freaking game. What a freaking hit from Nathaniel Lowe. And surprisingly, what a great 3 shutout innings from this bullpen. That's going to do it for today's show. Thank you all so much for listening and subscribing. And until next time, don't forget to enjoy Texas Rangers baseball.